Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I am so excited about today's episode and today's guest and today's fellow entrepreneur because this is somebody who is an incredible innovator in every space that he's ever touched. And being from Boston, I can confidently say that this guy is wicked smart to go along with all the many accomplishments that he's had. So let me introduce you to today's guest. His name is Luis Voloch. Luis is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Jimini. In addition to being a seasoned entrepreneur and researcher at the intersection of AI and healthcare, before Jimini, Luis co-founded Immunai, which is an AI-driven cancer immunotherapy biotech company now valued just casually, at over $1 billion. Yes, with a B. Luis earned his bachelor's in math, his master's in computer science, and he started his PhD in computer science, all at MIT. And before leaving his PhD program, Luis won the Best Thesis Award at MIT among all more than 100 PhD track students in computer science. Luis was also faculty at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, teaching management and entrepreneurship topics in data science and AI-heavy companies. This is somebody who, when I read and listen to Luis's vision of the future, it is a vision where both AI and technology and humans at the heart of it can coexist and collaborate in ways that yield far better outcomes for all of us. So I'm excited for all of us to learn from Luis today. Let's dive straight into my interview with Luis Voloch. All right, Luis, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to geek out about all the cool things that you've gotten into. But before we do that, you've got to take us beyond the bio. Who's Luis? How did you start doing all these cool things?
So I grew up in Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil, and lived there until I was about 16, when I moved to the States, and then went to MIT for my studies. Then been sort of around like the New York area for a while, and my journey was starting really from math and theoretical computer science. That's what I wanted to do for my studies. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a math professor, and then ended up falling in love with AI. And then during my professional career, I really fell in love even more deeply with the intersection of AI and biology and human health, which led me to start Immunai and now Jimini.
Yeah, I love that overview, especially because, Luis, having done my research ahead of our conversation here today, it's clear to me that your love for math is actually a theme that has followed you even into your entrepreneurial journey. A lot of people might look at your journey and think, oh, Luis switched gears from the math track, but it's really clear to me that math has left a lasting impression in the way that you see the world, the way that you think, the way that you process data. Talk to us about how that thread has followed you into Immunai and, of course, into Jiminy today.
Yeah, absolutely. Working at the intersection of math and computer science and AI, both during my studies and graduate work and then early work in industry, one of the beautiful things is that you really get this confidence that you can do a lot of things with data that were never possible before, as long as you have the right data and the right minds to analyze that data in the right way. And I was fortunate to start working at this intersection of AI and genomics early on, and bring some of these, math and computer science skills to a problem that at the time there were relatively few true AI folks working on. So I think bringing that computational and analytical mindset into novel areas is really exciting.
Yeah, well said. And Luis, I'm going to call this out for listeners because I'm so excited for you to introduce listeners directly to Jiminy. But first things first, I want to read the top of your website, the big bold headline there, which caused our pre-production team to say, holy cow, we need to reach out to Luis. We need to invite him to come onto the show. And that big headline says very simply, artificial intelligence can collaborate with clinical intelligence. And that is a beautiful vision of the future. And actually, Luis, I guess with you here, I'll argue that's a vision of the present that you are already helping to make possible. Talk to us about that, because a lot of people think that this is a dichotomy, two opposing forces. You've brought them together in a really powerful way.
That's exactly right. And these are things that are often in the news, or even sometimes in clinical circles and professional association circles. People can often think about AI as a threat to their profession as a clinician. And there are definitely many companies and products which are trying to train models and create products that are full replacements to clinicians. And Jimini's worldview is that the much more powerful versions of AIs are not AIs that work as standalone products, but at AIs that can collaborate with human clinicians in delivering care, being able to receive instructions from clinicians, being able to share updates, and really collaborate on a continuous basis with that. And we think that this is really the right cares, the right care model for probably many areas of medicine, and definitely ours in mental health.
Yeah, and what does that collaboration look like, Lewis? Because it's really clear to me that the human is the driver there. You're not taking anything away from the clinicians. You are actually aiding and assisting them and amplifying their expertise and obviously their years of experience. So, what does that collaboration look like?
Yeah, that's exactly right. The way to think about the collaboration is where the clinician can stay in control and really make the tough decisions, right? Make the diagnosis for the patient, come up with the treatment plan, and really make the hard calls, and also build a human relationship with the patient, which in mental health is called a therapeutic alliance, which is a very important driver for clinical outcomes in mental health. And a lot of the other functions that previously a mental health clinician would serve, including helping administer specific exercises or answer questions and help them through specific problems, are things that computational methods and AI can do fairly well, and that and they will continue to do better and better. So this sweet spot where the clinician can stay in control for the really tough decisions that we do not think AI can make right now, and then have the AI work with them to really expand their potential, right? So that they're able to treat patients even better. We think that's the really powerful way to think about it.
Yeah, and even beyond that, it's really clear to me, having researched all the cool things that you guys are doing at Jimini, is the fact that it's enhancing care across the board. It's making the clinician's job easier, more effective, better. But even on the patient side, talk to listeners and introduce them to Sage, for example, which you view as an essential part of the care team in between sessions as well.
Right. So Sage works as this care team member that works under the supervision and guidance of licensed human clinicians. So Sage does not work independently or as a standalone. And one of the major inspirations that we had early on as a company was that we started seeing these user patterns of the average person using ChatGPT and other products really for mental health purposes, and doing a lot of things that they would previously have done with a mental health clinician. And the thesis for us there was that, hey, these are things that people are voting with their feet because they like doing it, right? They like doing it at 3 a.m. when they have the problem, right? Not just when they happen to be with the clinician. And they also like working with an AI. And the major thesis for us as a company is that the right way to do this is one where first the product is truly built for mental health purposes, right? ChatGPT is not built for mental health purposes. And second, where the product is secure and HIPAA compliant, and also where there's all of the safety valves in there, including escalation paths for emergencies and so on. But most importantly, one where the clinician is in the loop, and the clinician can help see the progress and the struggles that the patient is going through, and also is able to steer the AI and it's where the AI can really have the context of what has been happening in that therapy room or in the broader mental health setting, so that the AI can best help the person under the supervision and guidance of the clinician.
So, speaking of context, Lewis, I know that we're obviously not getting highly technical here in today's conversation, but context is king when it comes to even just me sitting there as an end user prompting ChatGPT. Is that the more context it has, the more relevant the outputs will be. What does that context look like? Especially in a clinical setting, I feel like it's a unique set of circumstances, unique set of security precautions that you've already mentioned, and obviously your team has thought very in depth into. But, Lewis, when it comes to putting all that context together, so that the AI can augment in the best possible way, how do you make sure that all of that context and information and knowledge gets into the system?
As you said, context is everything in this setting. And I'll give you one example of a relatively simple example of how this can be so important in a clinical and definitely in a mental health setting. Let's say, for example, you are chatting with ChatGPT and you say, hey, I'm going to grab a drink with my friend Luis when he's in Tampa and tomorrow, right? The natural response for ChatGPT is to say, great, right? I hope you have a great time with your friend Luis. What else are you doing with him, right? Or something like that. And that's definitely the right response. Now, to your point around context being everything, what makes Sage so powerful is that Sage will have the context of the broader clinical needs and history of the patient. So let's say that you had been going through, or let's use a different patient model here. Let's say a different patient had been going through a specific psychiatric medication, which does not go well with alcohol, and that patient previously had a history of a substance use disorder, and they have been working with their psychiatrist on really staying on track, right? Both with the medication, but also staying out of trouble. And it could be that a friend that they're meeting is one that in the past they had a hard time meeting them without having an alcoholic drink. And that context is very important because it means that Sage can now say, that's amazing that you're going to see your friend. Would you like to talk about how we can do that while staying on track and not having alcohol, right? So context is everything, and context is also evolving quickly, right? Depending on the therapeutic progress of that patient with the clinician.
Lewis, I will say I don't mind you using me as the example, especially because it's clearly not a real example. Because if you were in Tampa tomorrow, we wouldn't be getting a drink. We'd be getting brigadeiros, and I'd very much enjoy that. But the point remains of the fact that that context is so important. And I think that whenever we talk about context within the world of AI, we have to go to one of the biggest challenges that society faces with regards to AI, and that is, of course, hallucination. Talk to us about how you and the team, which is a very talented team, I'm so blown away by what you all have built together. How have you tackled that issue of potential hallucinations and, of course, limiting them?
Hallucinations are an issue for any AI model. And everyone that has played around with AI in a significant amount of time has seen that sometimes the outputs are off, right? And they may not be catastrophically off, but sometimes they're off. And to your previous question, context is really important for keeping models on track. So if you want to think about how hallucinations happen, they tend to be much more likely to happen when you go into really deep rabbit holes, so to say, when you go into like very long conversations where the AI can really get confused much more likely. So in many ways, like as conversations get deeper and deeper, that makes it more likely. So the major way that we avoid AIs behaving wrong ways is first by introducing a significant set of guardrails around what the AI can even talk about with the patient, and other kinds of safety guardrails to make sure that it stays on track. So we have a significant amount of technology on that front. The second part is all of that clinical context that we talked about in your previous question, which really helps the AI stay on track. And then the regularity with which the patient sees the clinician is another safety guardrail there, right? Where you can think about it as every week or two, or whenever the patient sees a clinician, we're kind of getting back on track and avoiding going to this like very long thing. So there's avoiding hallucinations is significant part of what we think about, and these three ways that I described help reduce that significantly.
Yeah, I appreciate those insights. And Lewis, I'll call this out on the air is that as the host of this show, part of what I really enjoy about interviewing founders such as yourself is that you don't just have to understand or get to just understand the technology. You don't just get to understand your business. You're also thinking about the broader ecosystem and where Jimini fits in within the mental health landscape. And along those lines, something that I've observed just within my businesses and within my portfolio and talking to other entrepreneurs is that if we could rewind 3 years ago, a lot of people thought it was a badge of honor, that they were bragging if they could say, oh, we don't use AI in our services, as if that is something that is, we're retaining the human touch and all of that. I think it's pretty clear here in 2026, me as a consumer at least, if someone brags to me that they don't use AI, I think to myself, well, why not? AI has a time and a place. It's a very powerful thing. So with that said, I'm sure that you've observed friction in all different corners of the marketplace here in 2026, but where do you think that the innovation is being driven by? Because you've got a world-class team of clinicians and psychiatrists and a lot of really qualified people who are helping you to drive this forward. Is this innovation that you think is going to be driven forward by the clinician side of it, by the patient side of it, by both? I'm super curious because this is a big question in the healthcare world.
The innovation is really driven by all sides. So first, with that in mind, we had to form a pretty multidisciplinary, much more multidisciplinary team than a traditional tech company, right? So we have folks with significant AI expertise and also consumer tech expertise to be able to create these excellent products, but also the whole clinical sciences part around psychology and psychiatry, right? So this is a really multidisciplinary team trying to tackle this problem. And the reason for needing that multidisciplinary team is because adoption is really driven by multiple factors. So on the patient side is the ability to create these amazing clinically grounded products that require both the clinical sciences as well as this consumer tech and AI expertise to create the right patient products. On the clinician side, which is where we sell into, right? We sell to large behavioral health provider organizations. We need to communicate with the chief medical officers, chief clinical officers, and and CEOs. And there, the conversations are really clinical and scientific, where we really need to be able to communicate the science behind what's being done, the safety guardrails, and so on. So the adoption is really driven by both sides at once, which is part of what makes this both hard but also extremely exciting.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously you have extensive experience in this because at this point, obviously talking about Jiminy up to here, this isn't your first rodeo. You did incredible things at Immunai. Talk to us about that growth path and what that journey was like and how it set you up, obviously, for success in everything that you're doing with Jiminy.
Immunai was an amazing journey. We started a company with this dream of really merging AI and immunology and genomics under one roof. So before starting Immunai, there were very few places that really had that deep expertise under one roof. There were many incredible places for immunologists and genomicists to work, and there were many incredible places for AI people to work. But people that really worked under one roof, that didn't exist a lot. And that day-to-day collaboration really led into a lot of the amazing things that Immunai has been able to accomplish technologically and forming so many deals with pharmaceutical companies. And one of the main lessons that I had from there is that bringing the right team and really focusing on that to an extreme level is a game changer. In Immunai, from the beginning, we had an incredible scientific and technical leadership at every level in the company. And that was a game changer that continues to pay off for the company. And I take a lot of inspiration for that into Jimini as well, where we managed to bring incredible clinical and scientific leadership, and also business leadership, and that multidisciplinary aspect, like all under one roof.
Yeah, and Lewis, that answer right there, that reveals so much of what it means to be a founder is that you can talk about the technology, you can talk about the company, the market that you serve, but here you are also talking about the people. And so I want to switch the spotlight directly onto you. And as the CEO and a co-founder, what does your executive time look like? What are those questions that you're asking of yourself? What is that timeline that you're looking out into the future for? What does that executive time look like?
Yeah, as a founder, one of the hardest things is managing our time, because there is many different sources of demands for our time, right? And they're all reasonable sources. This can be from things that we want to do ourselves. It can be helping all kinds of employees with through things, and help talking with investors and talking with business partners and so on. So it's very easy as a founder to have a packed schedule. It's really easy to do that, and that is horrible. If you have a schedule that looks packed, kind of with 8+ hours of meetings a day, this means you're getting very little brain time to really think about some of the deep questions. And I don't know about other people, but I cannot do significant amount of really critical thinking in 30-minute increments. So one of the things that really works for me is blocking off a significant chunk of the morning from 7 a.m. until 11 a.m. or so, without meetings, unless something urgent is coming up, and really having that time to really think through the hard things that need to be done, right? Really being able to provide that very thoughtful feedback that is needed. So really guarding your time and making sure that you're spending time in the optimal way, and that you're determining how the time gets spent and not having other people determine how your time gets spent is really important.
Yeah, and I found that part of that is also having patience, is that you have to carve that time out. You're developing strategy, you're thinking about so many things. And I'm sure that you are just human like the rest of us, and you want everything right now. And particularly in a field that is always rapidly evolving, thanks to AI and thanks to technology, you probably wish that you could snap your fingers and Jiminy would be everything that you hope it is in the future. What does that patient timeline and roadmap look like? How do you flesh out, here's what we're going to focus on this quarter, here's what we're going to accomplish this year? What do those time chunks look like for you when you look at the future?
First, I think there's many different ways to do this, and I think different founders are just different, and they have different strengths and weaknesses, right? Some people, they may have uh, they may be able to be extremely organized, and really manage like long-term roadmaps in specific ways. Other founders may have their strength in being able to really drive that day-to-day urgency, while also doing long-term planning in a different way. And there is always pluses and minuses for different things. But I think for a founder, it's really important that they play to their strengths while improving their weaknesses, right? So they should not try to be someone else, or like to be whoever, whoever someone else wants to be. They should really focus on their strength, but at the same time, listen really closely to feedback around them, around things that are not working well for other people, and trying to improve as much as possible.
Yeah, really well said. I appreciate those insights, Lewis. I've got to squeeze this into our conversation because it's definitely been a shifting trend in the AI world over the past 2 years in particular. And that is, if we rewound 4 years ago, most AI companies that we saw popping up were merely AI wrappers, where they were using OpenAI's API and they were just creating something around that API. Recently, we're seeing the power, and I think that Jiminy is a great example of that, the power of actually building something with a purpose, actually building something that changes and understands a real tangible industry. What's your vantage point? Because you've been very successful in this AI space. What's your perspective on creating new tech versus building on top of existing APIs and technology?
There are multiple ways that AI companies can succeed and fail as well. So if a company is truly just a wrapper on ChatGPT and they are doing something that a different user could do with the same amount of time on ChatGPT, that is not a recipe for success. And there's definitely companies also focusing on really creating different models, right? And training models from scratch. And that is a very specific way to succeed that requires a lot of capital. And that's definitely very defensible, but that very few people can both do that at a technical level and can raise enough money to do that as well. What most AI companies, including us, are doing, and the ones that succeed especially, are leveraging these continuously improving frontier models from the both bigger and smaller companies, and creating really complex workflows around them. So Cursor, for example, is a great example of a company that does not train models. And in fact, right, they just very explicitly share which models they are using, but they manage to create workflows that make it really easy for people to leverage these frontier models for coding purposes, both as an assistant and in agentic ways. And that is an inspiring model. And there's many companies that will be able to have similarly successful companies worth billions of tens of billions of dollars that create these really unique workflows that are bringing their expertise to the table, not in the form of training models and model weights, but really around the complexity around how to put model, like how to use the model, or how to use different models together.
Yeah, and it's cool to think about what that future is because, as you said, there's no one path that we have to follow. This is the most beautiful time to be alive, in my opinion, because it's never been easier to just start creating in so many different ways. So, Luis, I'm going to put you on the spot one last time here with a super broad question. I always love asking this at the end of every interview, and that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and knowing that you are one of us, you're a fellow entrepreneur. What's that one thing you want to leave them with today?
The most important part of the entrepreneurial journey is who you're working with. That is way more important than the specific product that you think you may be building in the beginning, because these things always change. And it's really the people you are working with. So do not compromise on the people you're working with. And this includes both folks on the founding team, but also early employees. They have a significant impact in the family, in the company, and also investors, right? So everyone around you is going to play a really significant role in the company's success, also in your well-being, and really listening to yourself, being if something is feeling right or not, and not compromising on people for these early important roles is in my opinion, the most important thing in a company.
Yes, I so appreciate that advice. And Luis, I will publicly call out that I believe that this advice is even more powerful coming from you because you are somebody who has founded multiple very successful and fast growing companies in the AI space. And in a world where a lot of people are worried that AI is replacing people, here you are as the founder and CEO of Jimini saying, no, focus most on the people. The people are the important thing when it comes to your success journey. So I'm so grateful for you sharing that advice with us here today and all the wisdom and insights that you've shared along the way. I'm also very excited for listeners to go check out Jiminy and all the cool things that you're doing. So for listeners who want to find you and all of this cool stuff online, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Yes, it's jiminihealth.com, and please feel free to be in touch as well if you're interested.
Yes, and listeners, you already know we're making it as easy as possible for you to find that link down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. You don't have to remember it. If you're on the go, have no fears. You can click right on through from the show notes right down below. Otherwise, Luis, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.